Very, very good morning and a warm welcome to this roundtable brought to you by ETHR World and Coursera for Business. It really feels surreal to meet you all in person after interacting 2 years virtually. This is really exciting and we sincerely hope you have a great time at this event. As you're aware, the theme in the spotlight today is Learn, Lead, Innovate, the evolving role of learning in talent transformation.
We have reimagined learning into 3 eras. The first one is building the culture of lifelong learning. So that was our first focus probably a few years ago, right? So that's where, if you look at it, founders have built the great campus at Mysore. We are really proud, which is one of the world's largest corporate training center, right? As well as put a team of about 800 full-time educators at Infosys in itself speaks volumes of the importance that the management, the leadership team use for the skill building. So that was the first one. The second is how we can actually digitize, how we can actually scale learning, right? So that was the second one, that what we have done 5 years ago after Nandan actually has took over as our chairman. He said, how can you democratize the learning, right? So that's where we have built a learning platform for ourselves with 4 key core tenets driven by those philosophies. The first one is making learning convenient. That is to facilitate learning anytime, anywhere, on any device. Right? So facilitate the entire hybrid model of learning, both online as well as offline. Right? So the second one is making it relevant. How we can make probably that learning platform or a window, which is the one learning world for the employees. People run around to learn, to search for knowledge in multiple places. But how we can all bring all of them together under one umbrella. So that was the second one, how we can make it relevant and make it a single learning world. How we can use technologies, right, our machine learning features to recommend learning, right? Nowadays people are used to recommendations in our social platforms, in our retail platforms. How we can use some of those technologies to recommend learning depending upon what they are learning, what could be their next learning journey. So that was, adopting some of those technologies in learning was making it relevant. And the third one is making it engaging. So we are dealing with multiple generation of learners, right? So there are old-time learners who like the traditional way of learning, reading, right? And there are the intermediate generation who wants to learn and apply, and there are the Gen Alphas that we are dealing with, who wants to play and learn, right? Learn and play. So we have to have the systems, platforms which will fulfill the needs of all the generations that we deal with currently. So how we can make it engaging, make it more fun, right? So gamified aspects, or how we can introduce the immersive learning, AR, VR kind of a learning. So that was the third one, making learning engaging, or have the social aspects of learning, discussion forums, right? All of those aspects. And the fourth one is how we can make it matter, or make it data driven, right? So it's not just open learning. At an organization level, the leadership team or the managers or the learners themselves should be able to clearly see what they are learning, why they are learning, how much they are progressing, right? So how we can measure and then create an outcome, which is data driven and system driven.
Everything can't be done by a learning department, which is clear. We can do only that much. Then how do we really make everyone own the learning? The first part. Second is to also bring in a angle of responsibility for the learner. So, like the discussion was, somebody learns regularly, somebody tries to just get a certificate. What do we do with all this? So one is we are halfway through in building a business-driven learning framework, where we have responsibilities to each and everyone, including the learner, on what happens in the journey. When I say each and everyone, the HR VPs hold a responsibility on the 20 and 70 part. The learning team wants the responsibility on the 10 part. And how do we really do? And what responsibility does a business own? I mean, okay, business says I want people, we don't get people to a skill. But what is the ownership there when we really build all this and kind of get people through the learning? Another thing what we have done is to, on the democratization part and making it available, we told, why not we give a certain amount of money every year to people? We say learning budget and we have budgets and learning team controls the budget. Take a part of it and give it to learners. Tell them that here is X amount of money getting credited on your account on day one, and you have 100 days, 200 days to spend this on learning, on these areas. Why not you do it? So we kind of introduced this around, say, 6 months back, and we see that getting good results. I mean, you learn what you want and you own your learning.
Being an audit firm, we also say that everyone needs to have 40 hours of learning, right? And in some of our initiatives where people have demonstrated over and above, people have also done 100 hours. We measure for a purpose coming from the compliance business, right? What we've done, if they have crossed or exceeded the hours, we tell them this is the money available and you do what you want. So actually, to your point, we've actually, what do I say? We've implemented that. So we don't ask them for certificate, we don't ask them for what you do, but we tell them you can do what you want. People have gone done fashion course, people have gone and done some music course, to your point. They've done all of that. Basically, in a way, we are looking at rewarding them through learning itself and not through monetary incentives, right? Like we also say, we have business folks who are on SMEs, right? They can only teach audit fundamentals. So for them, it's like when you stand up, because that's also a culture of building learning, right? Leaders teach, leaders kind of foster the culture of learning. So at every level, we have our own business leaders who have to kind of bring in that learning culture and prepare the newcomers. So for them also, we kind of reward these. So
in real fact, the major challenge is for data engineering. In fact, every day, every single day, everybody's asking, how do we get someone who can come to this particular role and be productive on day one? That's the approach. That becomes a major challenge because even if we hire, that becomes obviously a challenge that obviously there's from market that we're hiring and all of that. What we've actually tried is to do a build program. That is the best part that we do. But even while we do a build program, another challenge that we've also come through is the domain. There's always a question. While internally there are movements, whether it is from the credit parts of it or from the insurance part of it or even from the CPG market. However, which team or which client are they rolling up to? That is the question. Because while you have a domain, but the question mark is that aligned to the client? Because the client is asking specific questions. That becomes another.
I've heard a lot of things and just be quick. Questions of, okay, how do we make people ability to learn again and again, learn and again and again. What we forget is that learning is a painful process after 15 years of it. Right? It is not an easy. Then how do we make them learn again? We change the service. Okay, now go learn. The second part is that we are constantly, people don't have time to learn. Great point. I think partly what we are trying to see is, okay, how do we reward learning? How do we reward the behavior? And we're constantly looking from a perspective of, okay, so look at from a past and current and try and understand the gaps. What we are trying to do, and I think this is something which has worked for us in say for the last 3 years or 4 years, we are actually not looking at the skill gaps. All we are looking at is what is that we need 5 years ago or 5 years in future. 6 years ago, TPF mainframe offload and the data was crying at the top of their voice that this skill is not going to be required in 6 years. In 2012. Nobody did anything about it. Today we know the future is on data science, data engineering. No, we know that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, this skill was actually there. That is going to come in. So how Sabre operates in that section, and we're going through a massive transformation, not in terms of anything else but Google and everything which comes out. We have created micro learnings, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Idea is we need to understand how the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z learn today. 40% of our workforce is that, right? They are not interested in 8 hours, they are not interested in 12 hours, they are not interested in 15 hours. They're definitely not interested in telling, okay, this is what you need to learn, go sit in the classroom. They still learn. So how do they learn? They learn by asking questions, right? Simple, like the word you used, and I like that, in the moment.
Learning has come out as one of the pillars in the culture itself, and we have called out clearly. And when we called out, we mentioned that it is learning with curiosity, which means that as a part of the texture of the company itself, we are saying that it is the learning not with a stick, but an environment that we are creating, a culture that we are creating. It should be encouraged by participating in learning. Having said that, there are homegrown portals and through which the learning happens, and these kind of portals, we have integrated with Coursera so that every learning gets triggered from the portal where we have the consolidated data, whereas we have the flexibility to access any kinds of learning, whether it is Coursera, whether it is homegrown workshops or anything of that sort. So that's one part which is happening. Then another part which is like define a framework, and it's role-based learning, and based on the business alignment that learning is happening.
Our focus is on how an employee needs to be trained around the product, because they come with the technology, because we take them from tier 1 institutes. They're very good at their technology, their technical skills. We help them how they can move into the product side of it. So how do they learn how the technology is being implemented in people? So that is the difference that we bring to the table. So our complete alignment to the business is in terms of how can we help them impact the business, because not only hire the right kind of people who come in, but also get them trained on the domain or on the the different tools that we have in the organization, align them to that and give them that skill so that we tell them exactly how in PayPal this technology actually works.
So we look at all our key skills that we require within the organization. The grad strategy focuses on that key skills, and I think which is common to a lot of organizations in the services sector. But what we also do is we get our leaders to start engaging with our campus grads. We create a whole engagement plan throughout the learning journey so that the technologies that they're learning become applicable on the job, and the billability is also tracked like that. So that is one way. Now across levels, we look at the skill requirements, and we have some interesting community of practices that we've established especially for the emerging and the future skill technologies, where there is a lot of applicability of the learning that's happening for actual client requirements. That's something we also do very actively. Then there's a lot of focus on the managerial capability and all that, but sometimes in organizations we don't look at the experts, the individual contributor expert track. So we also have an expert enablement program where they coach and mentor and build the SME skills within the organization.
I think the beauty now lies in that even Ivy Leagues are open for contextualizing.
Yeah.
So because we have tie-ups with various universities across Persia. Like we're doing a program, a 2 years MSc course with Vitspilani, right? So is it 70% is what they have, which is off the shelf, that we cannot change. But the 30%, they are actually working with us to make it relevant to to our parties.
We're really talking about three things. We're talking about the point of arrival, where do we want to get to, including some of the future skills that Gaurav spoke about, right? It's not necessarily what we know now, but where we want to get to. We're talking a lot about the journey, about how it can be self-motivating, about how learners need micro-learning and so on. But I think one other important point is the point of departure. where are the learners really starting from? And that's very, very different for each individual. And we've spoken about how talent, and Sanket, you made that point where you said that we want to hire smart people, not necessarily people who have everything that you require for the job. And we don't necessarily need degrees and certificates for people to be able to do that. So in that context of point of departure, journey, and the point of arrival, I think having this framework where you are able to know where people are starting from so that they can then traverse that journey is quite important. We're talking about how people don't really want to take 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours of learning. Imagine if you tell them to learn something that they already know, because that's the way it's been structured. You lose interest because for the first 50% of the course, they're reading what they already know. So at Coursera, what we've done is we have come up with this product called Level Sets. Really what that does is that assesses your point of departure, so to say. And through the skill set framework, you can actually start at the point for that individual learner, not for the cohort. The cohort may also have different starting points for each individual learner. And then most of the time, the point of arrival is similar for that cohort. So then they can traverse that journey. So this is what we have noticed is quite effective for both the organization as well as the learners as we talk about all of these things together.
Learning is a priority at a CXO level today. Not only today, it has been always. And as I stated in the beginning, that learning is a non-negotiable strategy for any progressive organization. If you want to keep your market leadership in the segment and industry that one is, you have to have a learning culture. Now, I always believe that, whenever we visualize learning, we always think about an instructor and a few people sitting in a class. That's even today, I believe, for people whenever you think about learning. But today, things have changed drastically, and I don't want to repeat what all of us have spoken about. The changes in the world around us has actually changed. The demographic cohorts have changed. The way people would like to have customized and personalized experience in everything and anything, right from banking to even the workplace experiences. But what is the issue around largely the L&D strategy, or whenever we interact, is that we always look at one size fits all strategy rather than trying to see what is the interest of the employee per se. So when we look at the learning experience or a larger e-learning per se, what we are looking at is, rather than looking at the subject content, subject mode itself, we're looking at problem solving, so that it brings more interactions. Rather than looking at participation, we are trying to see how we can do knowledge retention. We are trying to encourage conversations through learning. We are trying to encourage discussions through learning. So whenever conversations and discussions come through, we are looking at a culture of innovation where people can actually lead their own learning strategy by themselves, and they are involved in that learning strategy.
What we have really kind of deployed is internal talent marketplace too, right? So what this really means is like people, once they really connect to the purpose, they make sure that they come out with those ideations. They can actually go and log into the tool, and then what they can really do is those like-minded who really come together to solve that particular problem. And therefore, this team is inorganically formed. Nobody is as forced. The learning will stem from that, right? It is not the other way around. I think Ritu very beautifully said, like, it has to be curiosity driven, need driven, right? The teams are very inorganically formed to solve a particular customer problem, and the learning need arises from that.
And it's a combination of really looking at the N is equal to 1 approach when it comes to your key talent. I think there is this entire war for talent, and therefore the urge for the organizations to protect talent. And there it is really an N is equal to 1 approach. And then there is a segmented approach to really look at what do we want to do for the multiple
other titans that are there. We also have a manufacturing, we have got retail and manufacturing, right? So both ends of the spectrum, the entire value chain is there. And people want to, their learning journeys, they would like to look at it very differently. And more importantly, learning journeys are no more separate. It is integrated to the business agenda. And business, and I agree with what Jacob said, actually the learning functions and the HR business partners play a very big role in actually curating that learning journeys for the businesses and for the teams. And we've got Coursera as well in Titan, and I must tell you that in the last 2 years, and I don't know about other companies, but I have just seen this burst of CFTs that have happened. There are so many small cross-functional teams, right? But we forget that every cross-functional team is also a learning opportunity, and that's also part of the learning journey. And I somewhere believe that 70s got expanded, and I really think that the 10 and 20 have actually got diluted. So the 70 really has moved far ahead. And for us, our journey has really been about converting all of the current opportunities into learning. It is there. You don't have to create anything new, but really transfer that into, for people to understand, this is learning. That 2-minute learning, or, this is that moment where I have learned something.
Engagement seems to be a very critical aspect. And, this has resulted in ways by which every learning activity can be captured. And this resulted in a lot of companies investing in large-scale data analytics, right? Learner analytics, specifically capturing every moment of learning, right? So that's one of the important aspects that I'm seeing as a trend that's happening. The second aspect is what do you do with that kind of a data, right? And understanding the learner behavior, where they stand and how they would want to move. I see a lot of investment happening on using that kind of a data to see if how would essentially be in a position to engage with the learner on a personal kind of a basis. Third important aspect that I also would want to bring is the element of social learning, right? I see that learning is very involved process, very similar to what Gaurav was talking about. It's overwhelming essentially because of the fact that of the process itself, and also because of the too much of content that is available, right? So, helping each other, peer-to-peer learning, partnering with another person, saying that, I would want to move towards a similar goal, right? Nudging for each other's success, right? This seems to be, again, a very, very critical aspect.
Whatever learning strategies we adopt, everyone in the room, I think, will understand this, that we have, the fundamental thing is we have to increase our top line, bottom lines. Without that, learning, I don't think will even exist.
I think what's a metric? I think Gaurav brought up a very good point saying that their organization has no goals set for individuals. But we are, on the other hand, learning is part of a goal for us. So every employee has a certain goal for the annual goal, and this is one of the goals that we have. And its goal is not necessarily for learning anything, it's about what the skill gap. So we have something called a skill gap analysis for the role and for the future. One is for basically for the job that you're required to do. That is actually tied to what's his current skill today, what are the requirements for the role, and what's the gap. And that is actually tied to his performance management.
I do understand that the learning should have a purpose, and then we can define the metrics. Learning should have a context, then we can define the metrics. But as an organization, if the purpose is clear and if the context is clear in terms of goals to the people, I think what we should look into the 3A facets of the organization cornerstone. One is financial. What are the financial metrics which we would like to measure, and how learning interventions are impacting that? What are those financial? What is the productivity rate which has increased? What is the additional revenue which has increased due to digital learning or skilling initiatives? What is the productivity rate which has improved pre and post learning that skills or that roles? Third, the number of cross skillings or the new roles which people have taken.
I mean, firstly, thank you all of you for coming, for being a part of this roundtable. It would have not existed had you all not come. And the conversations were really wonderful, you know, starting with Sanket, who have really kicked the ball too hard, and it's really helped us to, you know, get that energy. And I really hope a lot of ground was covered and you are taking back some tangible learning outcome which you can implement in your life. For me, what is, you know, like Dallas mentioned, learning is equal to future of work. And I'm really going to go with that.